For 2 years, we followed the story of a family from Honduras seeking asylum in the United States. They ended up in Texas, part of a small percentage of migrants allowed into the country on a humanitarian basis. Before then, they'd been waiting in Mexico until their court case moved forward. That's the reality for most asylum seekers, especially after a federal court order put the so-called Remain in Mexico rules back in place. Border Report correspondent Sandra Sanchez looks closer at how those rules are affecting people waiting along the border.
After fleeing Honduras in the summer of 2019, Carolina, her common-law husband Jose, and their daughter Emily spent 4 months in this migrant camp in Matamoros, Mexico, across the border from Brownsville, Texas. After she became pregnant, she was granted humanitarian parole. So in late November 2019, they crossed legally into the United States.
Bueno, bienvenidos a los Estados Unidos. Y entonces nosotros no podíamos creer que estábamos pues ya ahí, pues mi marido estaba emocionado.
Their journey to the United States started here at the Gateway International Bridge in Brownsville, Texas, where they bought one-way bus tickets to Houston. But life in America wasn't exactly as they had expected. They struggled to make ends meet, to cope with the coronavirus pandemic, and to understand complicated immigration laws. At first, they shared an apartment with relatives. Jose found work as a roofer initially, then turned to cleaning jobs. But he's doing it without a legal work permit from the U.S.
The Trump administration, which believed that the availability of work permits was a draw for people to seek asylum, said instead that they had to wait 1 year before they could even apply for a work permit.
While Jose worked, Carolina stayed home in their apartment. She seldom ventured out, haunted by the memories from their months in the camp. Emergency medical practitioner Andrea Leiner worked in the Matamoros camp for over a year. She says many MPP migrants suffer from trauma.
The process of MPP itself is we've seen the humanitarian effects on that pretty acutely from the medical perspective. People are asked to remain in areas in Mexico where they're vulnerable to assault, they're vulnerable to kidnapping, sexual assault.
South Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar tells us the danger begins for asylum seekers when they flee without first having asylum granted or a place to go legally.
Why is it that people only think about danger when they're waiting to apply for their asylum? Again, I prefer that they ask for their asylum in their own countries.
71,000 asylum seekers waited in Mexico after the Trump administration started MPP in 2019. Now, as part of resuming MPP, Mexico wants the U.S. to screen asylum seekers faster. That's the reason for 2 new court facilities like this one in Laredo and another farther down the border. DHS already is rebuilding this immigration tent court facility in Brownsville, where cases for migrants who are forced to remain in Mexico soon will be heard. Researcher Austin Coker of Syracuse University says there are nearly 1.5 million pending immigration cases.
With the pandemic, many immigration courts ended or paused in-person hearings. Tens of thousands of hearings were canceled very quickly, and those hearings eventually, have to be rescheduled.
For Carolina, 2 previously scheduled hearings were canceled. Her next date is now set for mid-February, but they cannot afford a lawyer. And research shows that's important to winning immigration cases.
Nosotros podemos ir a corte sin tener miedo a que me puedan regresar a mi esposo y yo quedar yo sola con mis hijas.
They have their own apartment now. Carolina has a 1-year-old daughter, Isabella, born in Houston.
Green.
U.S.-born children of undocumented migrants qualify for some benefits like Medicaid and food stamps. But adult migrants do not receive U.S. assistance for food or housing. All children are entitled to enroll in public schools regardless of their immigration status. So each day, Carolina walks 4-year-old Emily to public preschool. The family also has a car, but no driver's license. Texas requires citizenship for that. 16 states allow undocumented immigrants to get a license. Driving without one is a common fast track to deportation, according to a report by the Center for Public Integrity. Now, if Carolina's family doesn't show up for their immigration court hearing in February, an immigration judge could order them deported back to Honduras?
Estamos ahí entre sí o no.
Carolina told me it's a difficult decision and she's unsure what she'll do. In Brownsville, Texas, for BorderReport.com, I'm Sandra Sanchez.
Court process for most asylum seekers takes 1 to 4 years, but under the MPP restart, Mexico is requiring immigration cases be decided within 6 months. The goal is to reduce the number of people waiting on the other side of the border. To see this full report and learn more about the MPP policy, go to BorderReport.com. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas this week. I'm Maggie Glenn. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.